I always tell people that legacy has two parts. A very small part of it is what you actually accomplished. Now, that does matter. In the real world, results do matter. So, a small part of it is what you actually accomplished. The larger part of it, the more important part, is the next generation of leaders that you created.
Welcome back. I'm TD Smyers, and this is No Cliches. Hello and welcome to No Cliches, companion podcast to my coaching, consulting, and leadership writing at A Bold Leader. I'm TD Smyers, and I've been in leadership my whole life, from taking point in small teams to command of military troops to multiple roles as a CEO. And if this life in leadership has taught me anything, it's that leading is more art than science. I call this No Cliches because we'll go well beyond the basics here, leaving behind the LinkedIn infographics to dive headfirst into some of the toughest situations a leader can face. Through stories and interviews, you'll get a behind-the-scenes look at leadership truths that always apply, no matter what industry or sector you're in. This is a no-holds-barred leadership conversation, so strap in. You can read a lot of books about leadership these days. It's the number one topic for new books being published. In fact, you could read them all, if you had enough time, and you'd wind up with a lot of knowledge about leadership stuff, but still not function as a consistently effective and memorable leader. If you're lucky, though, one of those books you read is Oak McCulloch's Your Leadership Legacy. Oak brings a lot of great examples, real-world situations that illustrate his points. It's not an academic book. It's a book about practical applications to leaving your leadership legacy. You're going to really enjoy what Oak has to say today. So sit back or set your cruise control and give it a listen. Let's join Oak now in the No Cliche studio. All right. Good morning and welcome, Oak. It's great talking to you today. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I've been really looking forward to this, TD.
Yeah, me too, man. Right now is just the right time to kind of link us up because your practice, what you do in your speaking and your writing is really aligning nicely with the work that I'm trying to do on behalf of rising leaders. So it's great to have you. Thanks for taking the time and coming to us from Daytona Beach. How's the weather out there?
It's tough to live here in Daytona Beach, but somebody has to do it. I took one for the team.
Yeah, what a man. Hey, when I was on the water, my wife and I actually did a lot of time in Florida and loved it. And eventually we're hoping to probably get back there and get back on the sea, which is something I think about like every single day.
Yeah, my wife and I love it here. We're not going anywhere.
All right, so I know we have a place to stay when we come to town.
That's right. You absolutely do.
So, Oak, one of the things you and I were talking about in the beginning, the things that kind of brought our two professional lives together, specifically carrying the torch or passing the baton on to the next generation. You got a great story that you kick off your book with about kind of what motivated you to get into that world of raising the next generation of leaders and building them. And of course, my practice now in coaching is specifically about that, about helping people land the top job and then leave their legacy. So your book, I've got a copy of it right here with a younger looking Oak.
Yeah, that was about 10 years ago, I think.
Well, it's a timeless book, so that's a good thing, Oak. But Your Leadership Legacy, Becoming the Leader You Were Meant to Be, is the name of the book. I will say right off the bat, though, for anybody wondering if it's worth a listen, this is probably the most comprehensive and condensed look at how to leave a lasting leadership legacy as anything I've read. It cuts through a lot of the academic stuff. It cuts through a lot of theoretical stuff. Talk to us a little bit about what you think makes this book so special as the author and kind of what went into putting this thing together.
I tell people right off the bat, if you are looking for something that talks about theory, you've got the wrong book. I don't even mention the word theory in that book. And because I really did write it I thought I was writing it for young, aspiring leaders, people who were just starting out and or had just taken a job as a leader. And I think if you read the reviews, I did hit that. But one of the things that I have found is I had a 2-star Marine Corps general who read it. Not sure why, but he did. And he sent me a message and he said, "You know what, Oak?" He said, "I didn't learn a whole lot of new things. I learned a few new techniques about how to do some things." He said, but what I really took out of your book, as I was reading along in my mind, I thought to myself, I used to do that really well, and I don't do that so well anymore. Maybe I need to dedicate some time and effort to get back to doing that well, something that helped me be successful. And I think we all need that nudge every once in a while. I don't care how long you've been a leader, you always need every once in a while to have somebody kind of realign you and set you back on the things that helped you be successful as a leader. And I think that's what my book does.
Yeah, I mean, having read it myself and seen a lot of the reviews of it, like you said, people that have read it and were really changed by it. But you said something really powerful. It's not like you're breaking any new ground in the book. Like you're saying, hey, here's something nobody's ever tried. You should try it. The principles that you highlight in there and that you tell through stories and capture at the end, you've got these great kind of takeaways at the end of every chapter. So it's, again, very practical. And I want to talk through some of those, right? Some of those basics that a lot of people may not understand in a full enough context to execute in real life. Does that sound good?
Yeah, it does. And I always explain to people, the principles of leadership, the things you have to do to be a good leader haven't changed in 2,000 years, nor are they going to change. Those things are always constant because there is no new things about leadership. There may be new ways to do things and new ways to communicate those things, but the principles are all the same, and they have been for a long time, and they will be forever.
And you've captured a really nice, pretty comprehensive group of those in your book. So let's start with this question. I just got through kind of going back and forth with somebody on LinkedIn about this, but what is legacy? When you wrote this book, you worked it in the name. What is legacy?
Yeah, to me, that's the whole reason of being a leader, is to leave a legacy. And I always tell people that legacy has two parts. A very small part of it is what you actually accomplish. Now, that does matter. In the real world, results do matter. Maybe in fantasy land where everybody gets a trophy and everybody's a winner, maybe not. But in the real world, results do matter. So a small part of it is what you actually accomplished. The larger part of it, the more important part, in my opinion, is the next generation of leaders that you created. And my last duty assignment on active duty, I ran an Army ROTC program. And Master Sergeant David Powell and I were talking. He was my right-hand man. And I say he worked for me. He was probably a better leader than I was. And we were talking about the importance of what we were doing, producing that next generation of leaders, not only for the Army, but for the nation and whoever else. And he said to me, he said, great leadership handed down from generation to generation is what develops great nations. And I thought, wow, what a powerful quote. I wish I could take credit for that, but I can't. But the most powerful part of that quote is that you can take that word nations and you can substitute anything you want for it. Family, sports team, university, hospital, food bank, whatever, it doesn't matter, because every organization needs good leadership. But that it really is, and that really kind of drove it home. I kind of always had that as what I thought legacy was, but that just drove it home completely. That really your legacy is that next generation that you create, who then creates the next generation and the next generation, and keeps that cycle of handing down great generation from generation to generation alive.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of outline legacy. And, although you did give credit where credit is due. So you gave Master Sergeant Powell the credit in the...
And I still stay in contact with Master Sergeant David Powell. He's a great man.
The post referenced legacy from an organizational standpoint. In other words, is the organization different today because you were
right
at the helm? And the point was made by one of the responders to that, one of the comments. Well, it's really about the people and the impact you had on the people. And my response back was, it certainly is. I think there's two levels there, right? There's the legacy in terms of how people were changed individually by your leadership.
Absolutely.
And what they can attribute it to. And then there's an organizational level of legacy where people look back and say, hey, that was the Oak McCulloch era of at the ROTC, right? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. It's funny because I was I don't know, about 6 months ago, I had lunch with a lady I commissioned out of my program at the University of South Alabama back in, 2007, 2008. And She's now a lieutenant colonel. You think that makes me feel a little old?
Yeah, well, I definitely know the feeling, man.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
And when, she had come out on the lieutenant colonel list, and I congratulated her. I said, so what do you want? Where do you want this to lead? What jobs do you want next? And she said, I only want one job. She said, I want to go back and be the professor of military science at the University of South Alabama and run that program just like you did. And that really makes you feel good. Kind of validates all the hard work and the things that you did. That people like that really do remember what you did.
Well, not only that, but in the story you just told, want to follow in your footsteps. I mean, that's a very powerful aspect of legacy and kind of passing the torch. My last role before my wife and I went sailing for a couple of years was as a nonprofit CEO. And I tell people all the time that the person who took that role from me, who relieved me in that role in the vernacular of the military, was smarter and a better leader than I am. And it was designed that way, understanding my role for the time and finding, recruiting, hiring, mentoring, and then handing the baton off to somebody who would then use their unique set of skills to take it to the next level.
Yeah, they didn't run it the same as you, and nor should they, because we don't want robots. We want people with individual abilities and skills and ideas, but they can build on what you've built if you get the right person in there.
And if you ask her to this day, she'll tell you that. She goes, I was able to build this because of the foundation you laid. And you're right. And that's a great way to look at it. It's like, building, putting together a structure, laying the foundation and putting up the structure.
That's right.
And then roofing it, furnishing it, and all that stuff. So now that we've kind of established what legacy is, and legacy in terms of how you influence people in a lasting way, and then how you influence the organization that you are accountable for in a lasting way. Let's talk about some of the themes in your book that may help people get there. Because, most of the folks that listen to this, okay, I get legacy, but, how do I kind of forge my legacy? What are the things I need to think about? And you cover these very nicely in your book, some of these. So the first concept that I kind of wanted to get out there is going to challenge people that are listening to this going, sure, but, TD's a Navy guy and Oak is an Army guy. So this is stuff that's military-esque, and it doesn't really apply in any of the other economic sectors other than government. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I tell people they are absolutely wrong. I'll go talk to organizations, and inevitably I have somebody who walks up to me and says, well, Colonel McCulloch, you know a lot about leadership in the Army, but you don't know anything about leadership in the civilian world. And I said, are you crazy? Leadership is leadership. First of all, it's all about people. Plain simple. It's not about flow charts. It's not about organizational charts. It is about people, plain and simple. And leadership is leadership. I don't care where you learned it. I don't care where you practiced it. If you know how to lead people, you can lead any organization. And I'm a perfect example of that, as are you. I was a combat arms officer in the Army. I was an infantry officer, armor guy. When I retired from the Army, I ran a food bank for 2.5 years or 2 years. Right. You don't get any different than that. That's a 180-degree difference. They were handing out 1.2 million pounds of food a year. When I handed it off 2 years later, we were handing out 3.8 million pounds of food, and we doubled the size of the truck fleet, and we almost doubled the size of the employee. Leadership is leadership. It's about people.
Having challenged this concept that, military leadership is different than civilian leadership, and I have to acquiesce a little bit. I do understand and admit this, that in the military, there's a certain amount of legitimate authority that's extremely powerful, right? Absolutely. That rank that you wear on your collar. Those of us who enjoyed some success in the military, however, never really leaned on
That's right.
that, right? To your point, we leaned on the things about the best way to motivate somebody is to inspire
That's
them.
right.
Not to coerce them or any of the other ways you can motivate people. Those of us who enjoyed some success in the military generally did it because we didn't lean on the rank. We leaned on the leadership.
That's right. In my 23 years in the Army, I think I can count on my one hand how many times I yelled at somebody. If you are doing it right, you've built the trust, and people will do what you ask them to do because they want to do what you've asked them to do. Not because you're making them do it, because they want to do what you're asking them to do, because they know that you have their best interest at heart and the organization's best interest at heart.
And you talk about some situations that were tough where you had to let somebody go who was a toxic player, or in one case, you discuss an employee that you had to let go because they just weren't getting the job done in terms of the mission. In that case, was taking care of cadets
That's right.
and seeing to their needs. So, what kind of observations will you share with us now and about dealing with those very difficult situations?
Look, one of the jobs of a leader is to give feedback, both good and bad. Now, we all love giving good feedback. That's easy, right? Everybody wants to walk up to somebody and pat them on the back and say, hey, great job. And we all want to be have that pat on the back and say, hey, you did a great job. The difficult part, and probably the more important part of being a leader, is doing that negative feedback, or the feedback where you have to tell somebody that they're not meeting the standard. My take on that is, if you don't give that feedback, say you got somebody who's not meeting the standard and you don't tell them that, then, and they're not accomplishing what you want them to do, then whose fault is that? That is your fault, not theirs. They may think they're giving you exactly what you want. They don't know. So a couple of ways that I like to do it is, number one, you got to keep it professional, not personal. And that's where a lot of leaders get into trouble, is they start going down that personal path, and you got to keep it professional. I like to do it outside my office because that makes it a neutral place. Anytime you call somebody into your office, the reaction is completely different than if you do it outside your office. So I like to do it outside the office. I like to do it in an open area where there's no table or desk in between us. It's just me and the person I'm talking to. And then the last piece of it is, I try to come up with a plan, because that's the difference between a boss and a leader. A boss walks up to you and says, hey, TD, you're not meeting the standard. Fix it. A leader says, hey, you're not meeting the standard. Here's what you're doing. Here's the standard. And this is how we, not just you, we are going to fix that. And you actually sit down and you come up with a plan, whether it's a month, 6 months, a year, whatever that plan is, to bring that person back up to speed so they can do what it is you're asking them to do. At the end of that time period, whatever that is you and that person agreed to, if they're still not meeting the standard, then they self-selected not to work for you anymore.
I like the very practical flow of what you just described. And I'm thinking, as I'm listening to you talk about it, that a lot of people listening are going to be like, sure, that sounds like a good way to approach it. They still may be a little fearful about the conflict, right? The inevitability of conflict.
Sure.
And, but something that I'll kind of insert here is that I dealt with that too. I mean, when I was we all want to be liked. We all want to be friends with people. We all want to have positive things to say, and we look forward to those. Like you said at the beginning, giving positive feedback is easy. Everybody looks forward to that.
That's right.
But by framing the before and after of a process like you just described, I actually developed in myself an attitude of looking forward to that kind of healthy conflict. And that sounds a little funny. You mean you actually look forward to giving people bad news? And I did. And the reason is because I put it in context. Right now, this person is failing, and I am dreading the conversation.
Right.
After this is over, that person will have all the information they need to succeed, and I will no longer be dreading the conversation. I'll be hopeful about their chances of success. So there is a way to put yourself on both sides of the process you just described and see that context, and then actually get motivated to get that done. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely, it does, because everybody dreads that period where you have to tell somebody they're not meeting the standard, that they're not doing what they need to do. But as you said, I mean, that's how we get better. That's how people get better. That's how organizations get better. I have a friend who, he was the head coach at Princeton University. He was the head coach here at Stetson University, football coach. And then now he's the president of a university, Doane University in Nebraska. And he told me one time, he said, Oak, you deal with winning the same way you deal with losing. You look at what you were supposed to do, you look at what happened, and then you look at how to get better. Whether you lost or you won, you can always get better. And the only way to get better is to be honest. What didn't we do well? And if you're dealing with an individual, then what aren't you doing well, and what do we have to do to fix that? And then you got to come to an agreement that, hey, these are the things we have to retrain, re-educate, align you so that you can meet the standard. Once we get there, you're going to be a better person and a better worker, and the organization is going to be better.
Something that I build my practice around is confidence, helping people with confidence. One of the things that easily 85% of top executives out there are suffering from a lack of confidence,
right,
among other things. But why is that? Why do you think that's such an epidemic among people that should be pretty confident? I mean, they've achieved a high rung of leadership. What do you think is causing that void in confidence?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So I think that some people, we all have that propensity to fall back on, am I doing well enough? Am I doing this? Am I helping enough people? If you're a servant leader like I am I helping people enough? Am I doing the things that I need to do? I think that's part of it. But I also think that unfortunately, a lot of leaders today have forgotten what their job is, and they're doing the job of other people in their organization, which then ties them down so they can't do the things that they're supposed to be doing, looking forward, having a vision, trying to figure out what's coming next so that they are not managing change, but directing change. And there's a huge difference between reacting and directing. So I think part of it is that they just got to get back to understand what it is they're supposed to do, and then do a own personal check. Am I doing the things that I need to do? And am I doing them well? If I'm not, then how do I get better at it? Because I don't care if you've been a leader for 40 years or more. You're always going to have to look back and say, okay, am I doing this right? Am I still doing the things that got me where I am today? And in a lot of cases, we don't. It's just human nature.
Yeah, I think that's a great, you mentioned that a couple of times too, in terms of looking at your own leadership traits and practices in retrospect. And something I think you've done a good job in your career. I have not, although I've tried to do that occasionally, is journaling.
Yeah.
Right. So capturing these things as I'm struggling through them and learning. And those few times that I have kept it, I've been able to go back and look at it and see the roots of why I feel a certain way about
That's
something.
right.
Right. Any other observations you want to share about the art of journaling?
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in journaling. I keep a couple of journals. I keep a personal daily journal, and I have since I was in about the 5th grade. But then I also, any job I'm in, I keep a professional journal. And I use this a lot, I keep a leadership journal where when I go to a conference, even if I'm the keynote speaker and there's other speakers there, I'm sitting there when I'm not speaking, I'm taking notes because I can learn from them just like they can learn from me. And I take notes all the time. And that came from where it really got cemented for me. I was a senior first lieutenant, and I was lucky enough to have General Hal Moore come and talk, and I got to listen to him talk. And I actually got to listen to him twice, which I'm very thankful for. And for those who don't know who General Hal Moore is, he's the guy from We Were Soldiers Once and Young, that movie, and Mel Gibson played his character. And he is larger than life, or was. He, unfortunately, we lost him a couple of years ago. But I'm sitting there front row because I'm excited, sitting there front row waiting to hear him talk. And my boss walks by and says, Oak, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm getting ready to listen to General Moore. And he said, are you kidding me? He said, probably one of the greatest Army generals we've ever produced in this country is getting ready to talk, and you have nothing to write with. Never happened again.
Right. So did you write? Were you writing on your arm or anything underneath?
I mean,
or did you rely on somebody else's notes?
That was absolutely right. I mean, again, you're pretty naive if you think that you can't learn from, and you can learn from, like I said, Master Sergeant David Powell, who worked for me. I learned just as much from him as he learned from me. I promise you. So don't ever turn down a chance to learn from other people, and journaling is one of those. And I would add to that the other piece that I am adamant about is reflection. I think leaders don't do a good job of reflecting. And I'm a big fan of routines inside a routine. So I start my day the exact same way every day. I get up, pour my cup of coffee, we light a candle. I listen to the daily mass, I read my chapter of the book, and I do my prayers. And then my day moves on from there. I try to end my day the same way every single day. I read some stuff, I write in my journal, and I reflect on what I did that day. Big things and small things. Well, how did my day go? What are the things I did well? What are the things I didn't do so well? And how can I get better at it? And I think if you do that as a leader, I think you'll see a huge difference.
So we started down this road kind of talking about confidence, and then we started discussing about journaling and reflecting. And the kind of an observation I've made recently in conversations with folks is that confidence is akin to respect. That you've got to earn it. You can't talk about it. You can't talk yourself. You can't demand that people respect you. Likewise, you can't really force yourself to be confident. You kind of have to put yourself at risk out there. You have to try things. You have to try so that you can succeed. And, to your earlier point, if you fail, you learn.
Right.
And then you pick that up and go on. So
I think the other part of that is that you got to be honest when you fail or when you make a mistake. You have to own it. If you do that, then you're going to get the respect of the people who you're leading. If you don't own it, then you're starting to lose some of that respect.
Yeah, I think that's in my experience definitely reflects what you're talking about. And I remember one particular point in my professional career. It was late in my professional career. Actually, I was a CEO of a nonprofit, and we were moving in a bold direction because we had to transform the organization. So we were doing a whole bunch of new things. And every week at our all hands, I would do an AMA, and ask me anything. And at first, nobody was asking me anything, right? Because, they were nervous. They didn't want to put themselves at risk, right? But I finally had a brave member of my team stand up and ask me about a particular policy that we were enacting. And she didn't agree with it. She thought it was the wrong direction and wanted to know my thoughts on it. And I said, well, it is definitely a new direction. You offer a new perspective. We'll consider it through your lens. And when we did, we saw that she was right. And it's like, okay, this is a key opportunity for me to highlight, listening to somebody and responding to somebody. Because, people always talk about how you can let people know you're listening to them and not just hearing them.
That's right.
And, right, feedback and all that stuff. But in my book, the most powerful way is to act on what they say.
That's right. I think that's a mistake that a lot of leaders make, in the Army, and I'm sure in the Navy. We have these command climate surveys. Everybody says, every time a new guy or gal takes over, you do a survey. And that's great. But the problem is that nothing ever gets done with that survey. Right. So people start getting jaded. They say, okay, why should I even care? Why should I go through doing that? So I think you're right. You got to act on those things that come up that need to be changed, no matter who comes up with it. I had a boss who retired a 4-star general, and he said, Oak, a good idea is a good idea, whether it comes from a private, lowest ranking person in the organization, or a general, the highest ranking person. And he said, and a bad idea is a bad idea, whether it comes from a private or a general. And we fall into that trap a lot as leaders, is we think that our idea is the only way, or it's the best way. And I always tell people, look, you have all kinds of talent out there that's working for you. You don't have all the knowledge, all the skills, all the abilities. In fact, if you do, then you haven't done a very good job of, one, building your team, and two, training them. Because the person who's doing that job every day should have more skills than you. And you should not be ashamed to walk down to somebody and say, hey, TD, how do we do this? Why do we do this way? Because they have more expertise at it than you do.
Walking that back to the concept of legacy, there was a tail to that. It wasn't only that, in my experience that I just shared with you, it wasn't just that we got a great idea from this person and that we acted to it, so she was validated. When the rest of the team saw us acting on what she said, and by the way, subsequently saw her promoted to management, my AMAs lit up. Because then everybody was like, okay, I'm not afraid to talk anymore. And I know that what I'm saying is going to get acted on. So there's kind of this level of organizational loyalty that, again, you earn by showing that you can be trusted, and that you're open to what your folks talk about.
Yeah, and you embolden people to then come forward with ideas. Some good, some bad, but that's your job as the leader, is to determine the good ones and the bad ones, and put into effect the good ideas, and give credit where credit is due.
Let's springboard off that into a concept that I talk about a lot when I talk to leaders who are trying to be transformational, right? Who are trying to do new things and lead their organizations in new ways. And I mean, these days, especially when society and technology are forcing change at a pace previously unknown in human history, the need to be able to embrace change and to lead organizations through transformation is every leader's got to know how to do that. So you make a point in your book about risk. Let's talk to me a little bit about your concept of risk, what it looks like in terms of how risk tolerance works in a leader's head.
Yeah. So, I use Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's definition of between a risk and a gamble. He said a risk is something that you take, and if you fail, you can recover from it. A gamble, if you fail, it's done. There is no recovering from a gamble. And leaders need to take risks, not gambles. I guess at times, maybe if that's the last ditch thing in a war, in a battle, you got to take a gamble, if nothing else. But very seldom, especially in the civilian world, should leaders take gambles. You definitely need to take risks. That's how your organization grows. That's how you grow. That's how everybody in the organization grows. So I think you got to be willing to take those risks, and you got to look at it as, what is the benefit if we are successful taking this risk? And what is the downside if we're not successful taking that risk? And, you got to weigh which one is the better option, better result. But if we don't take risk, you're not growing. It's that simple. You got to take risk to grow, and to stay viable in this, like you said, this ever-changing environment. The people who don't take risk are the ones who get left behind, and who then are no longer even relevant in their profession, in either their company or as a leader.
Yeah, you make a point in the book, and I think it's true. And in my experience, I can definitely tell you it's true. If you are highly risk averse, leadership is probably not the right role for you.
Absolutely. That kind of goes back to the decision-making process of a leader, because leaders have to make decisions. As I go around and talk to people, and sometimes, I've talked to a couple of companies and leaders in companies, and almost always you find somebody who's there who is risk averse and doesn't want to make decisions. And I'll ask somebody, so why didn't you make a decision in this case? And they said, well, I didn't have all the information. And I always tell them, I said, that world where you get all the information, that's called fantasy land. That doesn't exist. That very seldom are you going to be able to make a decision where you have all the information. You know what you know. You should be able to figure out what you don't know, make a good guess at that, and then make a decision. You can always change the direction of where you're going as more information becomes available, or as somebody gives you another idea, but at least start down that road. Because if you don't, you become obsolete very quickly. Your organization does, you do.
It's a great point, about the fact that you're never going to have all the information you need to make the decision that you're comfortable with, right? So there's always a level of discomfort in leadership, almost always, especially when you're breaking new ground or leading the group into uncharted waters, right? So finding your risk tolerance and being able to challenge that seems to be a real key to growing your leadership.
And I think that one of the key parts to that is that if you're smart as a leader, because I talk about mentorship, and certainly leaders have to mentor people below them. But as a leader, if you don't have a mentor, I don't care how high up you are in your organization. If you're the CEO and there's nobody above you, then go find a mentor in another company. Go find that CEO in another company that you trust and that you want to listen to, and bounce ideas off of people. Say, hey, look, this is what I'm looking at. This is what I'm thinking about doing. What if you were in my situation? What would you do? Would you take this risk? Use other people's experience. You got to have that, either a mentor you could call them that, or just somebody that you can bounce good ideas off of, or bad ideas, just bounce ideas off of to see what somebody else that's equivalent to you in your leadership ability or your leadership level would do.
With that, great point. Let's talk a little bit about the book and about the resources that are available on your website. So give us a little information about your leadership legacy, how to roll in on it, and what else they can find on your site.
Yeah, so I have a website, www.ltcoakmcculloch.com. And on there, it has a link to the book. It'll take you right to Amazon so you can get to it. I also have the things that I talk about. And, I've got a little blog section. I haven't written a whole lot of blogs yet, although that's next on my list of things to do. And so all those things are on the website. And I've got a lot of the podcasts that I've been on. I think I've been on like 132 or 33 podcasts now. And I think 70 or 80 of them, the links are there at the website. So you can go click on those and get some nuggets out of that, I guess.
Sure. And just so everybody here knows, on the No Cliches site at aboldleader.com, we'll have links to ltcoakmcculloch.com, and you'll be able to follow any of those links to get to his site and order his book, which I highly recommend. I have it in my library. I use it in my coaching. It is a great resource for practical applications about how to grow as a leader and how to leave your leadership legacy. Any parting thoughts there, Oak?
Yeah, so it really is about people, plain and simple. Take care of your people, and when I say that to young leaders, they say, because I talk about selfless service, that it isn't about you, and yet it's all about you. It's not about you and the title you're going to get or the pay you're going to get or whatever. It's all about you and how you treat and lead the people and the organization that you're in charge of. And they say, well, Colonel McCulloch, I want my next pay raise. I want my next promotion. I said, well, if you do this right, if you take care of people, they will be better, your organization will be better, and you will get your pay raise and you will get your promotion, but you get it for the right reason because you took care of people in your organization.
Awesome. Oak McCulloch, thanks for being my guest today. I appreciate it. It's been great getting to know you, and you've left us with some great jewels of wisdom for people that are not only aspiring to be great leaders, but to leave a great leadership legacy in their wake. Appreciate you, man.
Well, thanks for having me. I really have been looking forward to this, and it didn't disappoint.
Thanks for listening in to this episode of No Cliches. For visual stuff like links, texts, and pics, visit aboldleader.com and look for the banner at the top of the page. I'd also like to know what you think. You can leave a voice message at anchor.fm/aboldleader or a written one at aboldleader.com. I'm T.D. Smyers, and I look forward to having you back.